Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first in our next series of the Emotional Intelligence Training Company video series broadcasts. Very happy to welcome all of you to this new series. My name's Kim Cairns. I'm in Victoria, and my good friend and colleague David Corey is at this moment in Vancouver. Welcome, Dave. And just to give you a little bit of a snapshot of what we're trying to do here, last year we did a series based on the EQI competencies, and we're going to go through that list of 15 competencies again this year. And what we're attempting to do is have just a bit more of a conversational exploration of these competencies. And what we're encouraging people to do is send in their thoughts and ideas around each competency prior to our broadcast. Today's broadcast will be on self-regard, and we've already had some people contact us with some stories of how self-regard has unfolded in their lives. And what we'll do is take a couple of those questions, comments, stories every week and explore those a bit. And David and I will toss back and forth some ideas around our thoughts and wonderings about each competency. And so we hope you enjoy that process, and thanks again for joining us. Dave, any thoughts this morning?
Yes, thanks, Kim. Yeah, what we really hope to do this time is not just tell you everything we know, but rather to engage each other, to engage you, the watcher, the listener, and encourage you to send in your thoughts, stories, ideas, examples, experiences, etc. So what I find interesting, Kim, about self-regard is, or one of the many things, is how many synonyms or similarly labeled concepts there are. For example, and I just went online and dug up a few. People refer to this in various ways, and maybe we can talk about whether some of these are the same or completely different ideas. For example, there's self-esteem, and there's self-acceptance, and there's this idea of confidence, of sort of personal power. There's self-efficacy. There's this psychological idea of field independence versus field dependence, where you have to rely on others. So there's self-respect, self-love, adequacy, self-image, self-concept, self-perception, belief in oneself, and self-validation, all of which is, of course, about our view of ourselves or how we regard ourselves. What do you think, Kim? Are these similar? Are these different? Are they variations?
Yeah, good question, Dave. I think that, for me, when I hear those words, I just have this picture of those are all parts of self-regard, I think, to me. Self-regard is kind of the big umbrella of that, and self-love is part of that. Field independence is part of that. And so I think that, when I view self-regard from an EI perspective, what I'm thinking about for myself is, how do I actually look at myself? What's my inner dialogue about how I operate? And so that includes various skills sets and capacities that I may have. It also includes some areas that I'm continuing to work on. And it's constantly adjusting. There's not some kind of peak that I get to with regard to self-regard. It's an ongoing process.
Well, that's interesting that you say that, Kim, because self-regard, unlike some of the other competencies, in terms of just the term, the word, the phrase itself, has no built-in valuation. For example, with emotional self-awareness, for example, the more aware you are, ostensibly the better that is. But with self-regard, there's no directionality to it. It is how we regard ourselves. And then we have to kind of add whether it's healthy, that is, it's a way of regarding ourselves that's healthy and supportive of us, or unhealthy, when it just doesn't serve us well, either because we think we're better than we are or we don't think we measure up. So I think that's interesting of our 15 competencies.
Yeah, very, very. And I think that as you're speaking that too, what comes to my mind, Dave, is the weaving in of interpersonal relationships and reality testing. It's that notion that I better not just start to believe everything I'm thinking about what's going on. There is definite value in having those relationships with people that can provide information to me, provide some other perspectives about how I'm operating. So, to be able to have those relationships with someone that I trust, whose viewpoint I respect, and be curious enough internally, but also externally. Like, I'm feeling that this is how I'm operating. How are you perceiving it in this moment?
Absolutely. We don't have self-regard in a vacuum. So it's like, okay, so what is the context in which we regard ourselves? It's a social context.
Yeah.
And so it is those other people, those relationships with others that support and reinforce the way that we regard ourselves, or take a contrary position, in which case those relationships feel somewhat possibly toxic to us. It doesn't feel like a good relationship to us because we don't feel good about ourselves when we're in those relationships.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And what you're speaking to is that constant shifting of that depending on environment and context too.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. We can be in a context in which we have a lot of knowledge or experience or expertise, and have quite a highly healthy self-regard, and feel very confident and feeling competent, and then you take us out of that context and drop us in another that it's unfamiliar to us, that we really don't have any expertise in, and then look at how we regard ourselves in that situation as someone who is able to handle that situation, to be competent, etc. So it's almost like, Kim, we have to have some leeway for ourselves. We have to have some margins, if you will, within which we allow our self-regard to wax and wane. I mean, is that what we need to do?
Yeah, well, I think that you've hit on something very important there, and I think it's that notion of, definitely within our culture, and I think also in other cultures, there's this pressure to present as fully formed and fully functioning all the time. And so we up the ante internally on that, and we have this assumption that everybody else is viewing us like that too. And so I think for me, when I think about it, there's such opportunity in being able to relax within that and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Change is uncomfortable for us humans. And so when we get pulled out of that environment that we feel very comfortable in and placed in one where we don't feel very comfortable, to start kind of being in charge of that self-talk about, this feels uncomfortable, and uncomfortable is bad. So to take that bad connotation out of the notion of being a bit uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And I don't think that popular culture and the media really help us in that regard, Kim. I mean, we get bombarded with messages about how we should be, who we should be, how much money we should make, what material possessions we should have, and it makes it really tough sometimes. And you look at people who are made to appear in a certain way, and you see the billboards and the magazines and the television shows, and you start thinking, well, maybe I should look like that, be like that, have that, and we think there's a certain way, and if we don't measure up, then we have that discomfort that you're talking about, and I think, again, you're absolutely right. We should start some sort of movement which is all about being uncomfortable. That it's okay. It's
Yeah.
okay to feel uncomfortable, and it's part of what makes us human is this imperfection, and of course some people have written some brilliant books that are about that. I'm thinking of Brene Brown's The Gifts of Imperfection, right? And it's like the more we accept that as humans we are flawed, and just accept that, the better off we're going to be.
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree more, Dave. And it's interesting as you were talking about that, should came up a lot, and I know for me, in my own head, when I hear that should word in my self-talk, that's danger bay signal for me. I'm veering into not very good territory. so so it's about being able to discern, okay, where's that should coming from? What's that should all about? And does that really apply to what my values are and how I want to present in the world? And so it becomes what I want to have happening rather than what I should be doing or having happen.
Right. Yeah, and there are some real enemies of healthy self-regard. One of which is ego, and we were talking about this earlier, Kim. Some cultures, that ego just seems to run rampant and run roughshod over people, and in a real rigid hierarchy. That ego makes people feel real bad about themselves, and you can have some very competent. And we've seen this. We've seen some very competent people in situations where there's someone in a position of power with a lot of ego who feels it necessary for whatever reason to provide critical feedback in such a way as to completely incapacitate this formerly competent person who feels competent, has a healthy view of themselves, and then receives that critical feedback in a very mean way, and they're totally deflated afterwards. I mean, it doesn't make any sense when you think that the job of a manager or a leader is to increase productivity, that they have that power to decrease productivity and organizational effectiveness with a couple of comments.
Yeah.
It's rough. It's really rough, and you and I have both experienced it personally.
That's right. That's right. Well, and I think it also speaks to, one of the people that sent in a story this week is our colleague and good friend in Botswana, Sidi, and she was, speaking to what happens when your self-regard continues to take a battering. What are some strategies that can be employed within those contexts? So, i.e., when you have an ego-driven supervisor who's dogmatic about it being this way and only this way.
Yes.
And a desire, I think, on people's parts to speak some truth to power, but also being very hesitant about that because there's threat involved there too.
Yes.
So what are some of the strategies around that? And one of the things that comes to my mind is within those environments, and this happens to be an educational environment in Botswana, is coming back to, okay, what is our purpose here? In this part of the operation, what is our true purpose? And I think that when we come at it from that angle in our thinking and our discussion, is what we're doing right now, is how we're interacting as a team, is the leadership that is in place right now actually helping us achieve those desired outcomes? Is it really yielding better education for young kids? So I think that one of the ways to strategize in that situation is continue to come back to the purpose of why we're here in those kind of discussions. And in some ways that depersonalizes what feels like an attack. If I can just take a look at that and say, okay, this is this person's perspective now.
Yes.
But I want to bring the conversation back to, okay, is this serving the purpose that we're here for?
Yes, and I think it happens all too often in organizations that we start getting concerned with what so and so did or said, and it's like well, that work is substandard, that person is substandard, and you're right, Kim, in that in organizations we need to start shifting our focus away from people. So it's not about who's doing what to whom, but it's more how are we working together to achieve a common goal. And when we do that, and we see that our purpose is quality education as an example, then it's not about who's doing what, it's about how are we working together. And so we take that those beliefs about ourselves and about other people out of the equation, and we focus on what we're there to do. So that is absolutely it is a great way to sort of begin. And we talked about we've talked many times because we talk about this a lot. This idea of choice points. And that self-regard is made up of beliefs we have about ourselves, and it's about, well, which beliefs do we choose to hang on to, because they serve us, and which beliefs do we need to challenge and perhaps disregard and replace with a more healthy, supportive belief. And that's tough, Kim, to change our beliefs. Have you ever tried to change your beliefs, Kim?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's kind of an ongoing, it's an ongoing fast of my life, Dave, because I think those beliefs stem from what I know at this point. So my cue in my own head becomes, okay, Kim, this is what your belief is in this situation, with the knowledge that you have at this point. Would this be an opportunity to actually maybe add to that knowledge pool before I run too far in this direction? So it's that constantly adjusting course.
Sounds to me like you're bringing reality testing into it.
Well, I am bringing it back in, and I'm also bringing in a bit of impulse control into this situation. When I look at impulse control from an EI perspective, to me, it's not about whether I'm going to have another piece of chocolate or not. It's backing up to where I'm actually at in that moment, and knowing that I have a choice point there of, do I go with my default response in this situation, or is this an opportunity to come at it from a different angle? And I think that's really flexing that impulse control muscle in benefit of my self-regard, because my self-regard comes back to me viewing who I am, and also being able to express that outside. And so is this an opportunity to say what I truly believe in that moment? And as I'm saying that, I'm also inquiring, what's your perspective on it? It's not being dogmatic about my perspective.
Right. Yes.
So there's a little assertiveness thrown into the tapestry again, too, right?
Yeah. And so interesting how these all interact, and how connected they all are. I'm just thinking about our next episode, which is all about self-actualization, and absolutely we'll get there when we get there. But the interwoven nature of how we view ourselves as to whether we are involved in what has meaning and a sense of purpose for us that leads to a sense of fulfillment, that leads to our self-actualization, that's it's fascinating. And it all starts with what we believe about ourselves as worthy and deserving and valuable. And we see this a lot, Kim, in organizations where people feel like what they have to contribute or what they have to offer is somehow of substandard value. And so they're not assertive because they don't feel that what they have to contribute matters. And all of this is so critical for leaders, because leaders have to be aware of how they construct those situations and circumstances where people either feel okay to speak up, where they can speak up, have that their contribution valued, which leads to a greater sense of self-regard, or where their contribution is put down, insulted, and they are basically told, in not so many words, that what they have to contribute is of lesser value, and therefore they are of lesser value. And isn't it interesting, Kim, how we attach, the things that we do with who we are as human beings? That's fascinating.
Yeah, yeah, and I think you brought up a great point, Dave, around leadership, and what an opportunity there for a leader to, be a bit more vulnerable in situations by saying, "Here's how I'm regarding this. I'm a bit hesitant to go in this direction, and here's how I'm going to manage that hesitancy." It's so you're exhibiting that it's okay to talk about that, that it's okay, to release more of self-regard. Yes, I'm in charge here. I'm the one that's supposed to have all the answers. I don't have any answers here.
Right.
Or a couple of answers that I'm thinking about having. What's everybody else thinking? So a great leadership opportunity with regard to being expressive about how I'm regarding myself in a given situation.
Kim, let's talk for a moment about how a high score in self-regard gets leaders in trouble. We've seen it many times. We've been the victims of it. What does that look like?
Well, and I think you've raised a couple of good points there, Dave. It's that notion that we need to score really high in the EQI in every competency, and I think as we work with it more and more of the downsides of high scores come into play too. So, of course, with self-regard, if that's teamed with a lower empathy kind of rating, that's a nasty little combination potentially, right? I would tend to have more of a focus on myself then, not be too interested, not be very curious about what's going on for other people, and so you get this more dogmatic approach from people. You can have that happen.
And that ego-driven motivation of people, when it's ego-driven, it's not going to be good for the organization.
No. No, it's not going to be good for the people that are right around you, and that ripple effect will go through the entire organization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we see this in terms of corrupt leaders. People who think that that because of the power that they have, that they are untouchable, that they are that the nation or the organization's bank account is there for their use, and it leads to some real huge negative impacts on organizations and whole nations. And that's terribly upsetting when that happens, and it is because of an unhealthy self-regard that is and in fact, if some of those people were to take the EQI, they'd probably get a high score, but it's not a good thing. So we have to be aware of that too. When I did a little bit of looking around on some of the scientific research into self-regard, one of the things that came up was the connection with humility. So this is another interesting concept, is the idea that that humility, being humble, sort of recognizing that we are not above others, but we are one of others, is an important concept as well. And just really important to remind those people who may be struggling with an unhealthy high self-regard, is that is the reminder that they likely, to use an old fairly male expression, put on their pants one leg at a time, like the rest of us. So that's. The other areas of research are connected with things like forgiveness, interestingly. So forgiveness of oneself, and isn't it interesting, Kim, that we are sometimes our harshest critics, sometimes have the most difficult time forgiving ourselves.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that that exploration of what's behind my need for perfection, something that actually doesn't exist. what, what's driving me? What's driving me in that direction all the time? And so, I think another part of self-regard is really exploring what do I value, and how congruent am I with those values and how I'm operating every day, and who are those values serving? Those values need to serve me, but they do need to apply to everybody else that I'm interacting with. As part of your example of one of others, that of part is so important. And
No,
so,
sorry, Kim. Go ahead.
I think sometimes, Dave, when we're talking about um, self-regard results that people aren't happy with. And what I find in conversation is I am a perfectionist. I have real high expectations for myself. And so then a deeper exploration of, okay, what is of value in that for you? And what are the results of that for you? Are
Right.
those places that you want to be in a lot? And if so, why are those places feeling like that for you?
Right.
So again, it's that the beauty of this model, I think, is just that opportunity to explore our self-awareness, and on an ongoing basis. It's not about doing an assessment, looking at the results, having a debrief, and then, okay, that was interesting. It's about that ongoing process, engaging in pretty steady reflection of how I am viewing myself and what impact that is having in all facets of my life.
Well, you just brought up another real important correlation with beliefs. So this idea, this belief that I'm a perfectionist, is that does that serve you in producing quality work without affecting your level of anxiety, or does it just mean that it's never good enough because this idea of perfection is probably not a valid concept for us human beings. And so it really is about looking at those beliefs, and we have a lot of limiting beliefs. So much so that people like Carol Dweck who write about this open and closed mindsets, that the way that we believe about ourselves in interaction with other knowledge is also interesting. It sets us up to learn, to being humble and saying, you know what, I don't know it all. I do want to learn wherever we are, or to say, you know what, I'm good, and I don't need to learn more. And going through life with a fairly closed mindset and not really being open to learning.
Well, and thanks for bringing up Carol Dweck too, Dave. I mean, one of the purposes in our new series is to leave people with perhaps some readings and viewings that might be of value. And so Dave's already referred today to Brené Brown. We would really encourage taking a look at Brené Brown. You can see a couple of her videos on TED Talks, tedtalks.com. Just Google that. She's got some great books out. So with regard to self-regard, do a little Brené Brown reading, and I think also Carol Dweck, another good recommendation.
Absolutely, and with respect to TED Talks, Amy Cuddy has a fantastic video on power poses. If you don't know about power poses or haven't heard about them, go take a look at Amy Cuddy's TED Talk. And Sherwin is just letting us know, oh, by the way, we have our wonderful webmaster, graphic artist, technical support, Sherwin Arnott, who's on the call, but he's just reminding us of various things. And one of the things that he says is that we're going to have post-show notes. We're going to post those as a blog post and invite you to come take a look there. We'll have references to all of the resources that we mentioned, and a bit of a summary of our conversation there. And again, really want to invite you to email your ideas, your thoughts, your stories, your experiences, etc. for our upcoming show, which will be on self-actualization
2 weeks.
in 2 weeks. So, we really want you to let us know what your questions are, and the wonderful thing about this medium is that it's set up to be interactive, and so we really want to interact with you. So, Kim, we've got that's the time that we had allotted for this. Kim, did you want to add any final comments?
No, I think you covered what I wanted to say, Dave, and I just want to thank people for viewing us, whether it's in person today or on YouTube later on. And do keep in mind that 2 weeks from now we'll be discussing self-actualization. So any stories of successes and pitfalls that people have encountered with regard to that self-actualization process would be greatly appreciated. And as we said earlier, we'll select a couple of stories each week to talk in a bit more depth about. So thanks again to Sidi in Botswana for her notes around self-regard. And thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you, everyone, and be sure to check out our website for more information about what it is that we do, which is EITrainingCompany, all spelled out, .com. So thanks very much, and we hope to see you next time. Bye for now, everyone.